Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we are going to start a new hadith today. Hadith number 18 of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. If people want to pull it up. This hadith goes into a few specific topics. And people want to pull it up, we can inshallah read through it. It's the first time we're engaging this hadith. We'll probably look at it over a couple of weeks, but it still falls within kind of this section in the text that Imam Nawawi is discussing various modes of ethics and etiquette. Does anybody want to read it for us? The Arabic, the English? You read either or. Yeah, go for it.
Be conscious of the law wherever you are. Follow the bad deed with a good one to erase it, and engage others with a beautiful character.
Great. Can somebody read the Arabic? We're looking at Hadith 18 of the 40 Hadith. Yeah, go for it.
عن أبي ذر جندب بن جنادة وأبي عبد الرحمن معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اتق الله فيكما كنت وأتبع السيئات الحسنة يحمها وخالق الناس بخلق حسن.
Jazakallah khair. So this is an interesting hadith in that Imam Nawawi is introducing it with two narrators, Abu Dhar and Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhuma. May Allah be pleased with both of them. This is the first time we've seen either of them narrating hadith in this text, just to kind of give a little bit of an insight into who they both are. Abu Dhar and Mu'adh ibn Jabal have very different placements within the experience of prophetic living. Abu Dhar is said to be one of the first people to convert to Islam. Some would say he was the fifth person overall to become Muslim. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he was of the Ansar and was very young when he embraced Islam, but didn't enter into Islam until the Medinese period was getting started, right? So some say he was amongst those at the second pledge of Al-Aqaba to become Muslim. So if you've been coming to the Sirah class we do on Wednesdays, we're talking about the pledge of Al-Aqaba recently. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal came into Islam in that setting. Abu Dhar came in much earlier and experienced a lot of things very differently. Abu Dhar radiallahu anh, he was from a tribe called the Ghafar tribe. And why Imam Nawawi mentions these two names, Jundub ibn Junada, some people said that Abu Dhar's actual name was Junada. Some said Jundub. Imam Nawawi is mentioning both here. We know him more popularly as Abu Dhar, but this wasn't his given name, just kind of the name that we knew him as more so, and the associated with his tribe, the Ghafar tribe. The Ghafar tribe was a tribe that was just known for his kind of banditry. They were highway robbers. Their reputation wasn't necessarily the best in that sense because of how it was that they engaged caravans in this way. To the extent that when Abu Dhar heard about the Prophet, he was from a tribe external to Mecca. He had sent his brother, and then eventually he himself came into Mecca. And Abu Dhar, they said, he engaged the people trying to find the Prophet of God for quite some time. And when people heard that he was from the Ghafar tribe, they actually moved away from him, just the general people of Mecca, because of the reputation of the Ghafar tribe. And Abu Dhar ends up becoming Muslim, one of the first to become Muslim. He publicly declares his Islam and gets persecuted and beaten by the people of Mecca for sharing it. The Prophet ﷺ, he some people say Abu Dhar waited up to a month's time for the kind of meeting with the Prophet of God, and all he drank at that time was Zamzam water. And some of the narrations say that what was on his body, like his stomach, became fleshy, meaning like Zamzam was enough to sustain him through the nutrients and everything it provided, in lieu of like a kind of holistic diet, so to speak. But when he meets the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Dhar is told to go back to his tribe and teach them Islam as well. He engages them. Many of them convert to Islam through his kind of engagement of them. From the onset, Abu Dhar radiallahu an is somebody who just has a deep commitment to practices of zuhud. He was like very anti-materialism, so they would say in Abu Dhar's house, like there was nothing in his house. A dirham didn't spend like longer than a day in Abu Dhar's house. You juxtapose this to other individuals who were quite wealthy in Islam, right? Abu Bakr radiallahu an, prior to the hijrah, they said he had about 40,000 dirhams or dinars to his possession. And by the time they leave to go to Medina, which is where we're at in the Sirah class on Wednesdays, he had about 5,000 dirhams left, right? He spent 35,000 of these things over the course of that first period of revelation. But you can't spend money you don't have. Do you know what I mean? So he had to have it. Abu Dhar didn't keep one of these like pieces of currency in his house longer than a day. He was very much so kind of uh, anti-wealth, if that makes sense. And then when we know the other things that we know about him, he had a deep commitment to social justice. He spoke out quite vehemently against wealth and the wealthy, to the extent that he, after the Prophet's passing, moved to Syria, came back, and under the Khalifa of Uthman radiallahu an, Uthman radiallahu an actually has Abu Dhar removed from the city because of just how publicly he chastises people of affluence. Do you know? Meaning like his rhetoric is starting to impact and turn people away from certain things. And so Uthman radiallahu an says, you need to kind of not be here, so to speak. The Prophet says of Abu Dhar, the earth has not carried, nor has the sky shaded a man more truthful than Abu Dhar, right? Like when Abu Dhar is coming back with his tribe, all these people didn't want the Ghafar tribes to be in their society. The Prophet sees like this group of people coming on the horizon, and he says, Kun Abu Dhar, the be Abu Dhar, right? Because he knows what this man stands for, his principles, his ethics, and how it is that he just kind of carries himself in that way. And so his asceticism aside, which is different, right? Like zuhud is different from simplicity. Do you get what I mean? Right? It's like he was like very much so rooted in his extreme kind of rejection of that which is materialistic, but he also just lived like a very simple life. Do you know? So his rhetoric matched up with his actions. There wasn't a lot going on in terms of what he had, comparatively, even to Muslims on a whole. Abu Dhar just had like a very simple way of engagement. There's beauty in this, right? People come into this musalla, and if you came in here from day one, I don't know how many of you were here back then, but we came into this room in 2012, do you know? And it was just carpet and the walls that were painted, and that's pretty much it, do you know? There's not like calligraphy, there's not designs. The mimbar, mashallah, came as a gift from somebody who is a wood maker and crafter, right? He just gifted it to us. It's nice, it's beautiful. I think it gives like a lot of different orientation to the space. But fundamentally, like you come in here and it's just like a simple space. But people can sit in here for hours. They look out at the view, they pray. There's barakah and simplicity, and Abu Dhar as a companion, like reminds us of this. And you think about the relationship to his commitment to truth and social justice, as well as his commitment to simplicity. Do you get what I mean? Because if you don't have a lot of stuff, then you're not consuming a lot of stuff, because there's nothing to consume. And our spiritual diet heavily is attached to consumption. What you eat plays a key role in both how you speak truth and how you see truth, right? May Allah make us those who see truth as truth and falsehood as falsehood. And Abu Dhar, in addition to these qualities, he was known for his outspokenness. Do you know what I mean? Like, he didn't just kind of acquiesce, but he also said, this is bad. Like, this is not good. All of this stuff that you're going towards. Does that make sense? Right? And he passes away in the 32nd year after Hijrah. So he's older than Mu'adh bin Jabal, right? Who's also being noted as narrating this hadith. When Abu Dhar passes away, the Prophet ﷺ had said about him that you will live alone, you will die alone, and you'll be resurrected alone. Right? Abu Dhar, even before he converted to Islam, was somebody who embraced like Tawheed as a principle theologically. Right? So he was from amongst the people who they were not mushrik, but uniquely practice like monotheism. And this is an important thing to understand, because to be Hanif, is not just about monotheism, but to be Hanif is to be nonconformist, right? So think about this. Do you get what I mean? This guy is basically known as being somebody whose reputation precedes him because of his tribe. They were essentially bandits, highway robbers. Nobody thought there was anything that was so good with him. Later on in his life, it actually gets held against him because of who it is that he traces his tribes to and what it is that they're known for. Do you see? The only people who don't hold it against him and bring it up are Muslims. Because in Islam, when you convert to Islam, like, it's not just lip service, right? And it's really important because as a community, you don't want to just buy into slogans. Do you know what I mean? Like, when Allah tells us and Allah's messenger tell us that everything gets erased with the Shahada, then everything gets erased with the Shahada. Does that make sense? So Abu Dhar converts to Islam, and none of the Muslims are bringing up, don't you know who it is that you come from? Do you see what I mean? Other people bring that nonsense up, but these other Muslims, they're not bringing that up. When he passes away, his janazah prayer isn't necessarily convened with so many people, but amongst the noteworthy people who are part of his janazah is Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu an, who also is one of the first people to convert to Islam. And Abdullah bin Mas'ud was the first one to recite Quran publicly in front of the Kaaba. He recites Surah Rahman, and he's not a big person. Abdullah bin Mas'ud also is marginalized, chastised. He is a Sahaba who is physically small, right? The Hadith describe him. People would kind of make fun of his leg size when the wind blew and his thobe was lifted. He didn't have like large legs. And the Prophet would say that don't make fun of him. Those legs are going to weigh heavier on the scales on the day of judgment than the mountain of Uhud. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, his students describe his hair as being in braids. He has dark skin. He's a black companion. And he influences heavily the people of Kufa, which become the influencers of the establishment of the Hanafi school in large part, but also more broadly, just Islam's legislative development, right? Abu Dhar is treated a certain way. Abdullah bin Mas'ud is treated a certain way, right? Like, Abdullah bin Mas'ud comes and praise the janazah of Abu Dhar, even when he's living at a distance from this community. Do you see what I mean? But he's known for these qualities and characteristics: his zuhud, his asceticism, his simplicity, his commitment to social justice and truth, and his outspokenness, right? Like, he's not mincing words. He's telling you, like, this stuff is not the way we're supposed to be. He's a unique companion in that both the Sunni and Shia tradition of Islam, from my understanding, hold him in very high regard. And amongst the things that he very sharply critiqued, he prohibited the hoarding of wealth. He talked about the importance of having just governance. He talked about the spiritual dangers of like luxury and extravagance. And he spoke quite often about the duty to speak truth to power. And he was very much so, if we were to look into his life, kind of an exemplar of what asceticism from an Islamic framework looks like, was really focused on economic justice, and how it was important that we had parity and not disparity amongst populations. He critiqued corruption, which is an important thing to understand. We're not supposed to be people who romanticize our tradition, but as Islam grows in affluence and influence, so too, like power becomes a corrupting kind of variable. But he lived very kind of uncompromising in the ways that he lived. Mu'adh bin Jabal is different from Abu Dhar radiallahu an, in that Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu an, he is a much younger man when he embraces Islam. So he's around 18, and he's from Medina, and he's from the first group of the Ansar, whereas Abu Dhar was from the first group of Muslims on a whole, right? Their experience is just very different. It's important because there's not a homogeneity to the companions. Anybody who tells you that our methodology is reductive and we're all supposed to be exactly the same, cookie cutter, like versions of each other. We dress the same, we eat the same, we have the same, like it's just not there. These are two companions who their lived experiences are so different, let alone their backgrounds, their heritages, their interjection point to Islam is very different. And they're narrating the same hadith. There's other companions who narrate this hadith. Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu an was somebody who is very close to the Prophet of God. He's about 18 years of age when he converts to Islam. The Prophet says of him, the most knowledgeable of my ummah in matters of halal and haram is Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu an. One of the famous hadith that is involved with Mu'adh bin Jabal is the Prophet tells him very explicitly, "O Mu'adh, I love you." And he gives him a dhikr that when you're taught this particular remembrance, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husna ibadatik, that when you're taught this, that, oh Allah, help me to remember you, thank you, and worship you like well with beauty. When they teach you this, they teach you the part also where the Prophet conveys to Mu'adh bin Jabal that he loves him. Do you know? So you have generations of people that are not just teaching the dua, but the teacher is telling the student also that I love you. Do you see what I mean? Mu'adh bin Jabal, you have to imagine as a young person, like, and we're going to get into this later on, but like he's sent away by the Prophet of God and told, like, when you come back, I'm probably not going to be here anymore. Do you know? And so Mu'adh bin Jabal has to leave knowing that it's the last interaction he'll have with the Prophet when he's sharing these things with him. He was somebody who was a part of kind of the writing of the Quran during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He was appointed both as like a religious teacher and a judge at a very young age. And the Prophet sent him as his ambassador, as well as to govern the people of Yemen and to teach them Islam. And in that hadith, like it's oriented around laying the basis of how we derive ahkam, you know, the Quran, the Sunnah, ijtihad, etc. But he's also sending him to govern, and he asks like how you will govern with equity and justice. And so that's like the hadith. The Prophet asks, how do you judge matters? By the book of Allah. If not found there, then by the sunnah of the Prophet. If not there, then I will strive with my own ijtihad, my own opinion. And the Prophet praised him and says, praise be to Allah who has guided the messenger of Allah to what pleases the messenger of Allah. He played a very critical role in the early development of how Islamic governance and education gets institutionalized. Like, this stuff doesn't happen at random. Do you know what I mean? We're trying to build a separate space. May Allah give us tawfiq in it, right? It's not just a hodgepodge of, hey, we're just going to throw random stuff together. There's got to be a plan and a strategy and the plugging in of people who have the skill sets and expertise to know how to build out certain things, right? We're in a building right now where there's a security guard and a campus safety office. Over there, there's no campus safety office. I don't know how security works. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if any of you know how security works, but when we get somebody to make our security plan, they're going to have to know how security works. Does that make sense? Right? Mu'adh bin Jabal is being elevated to positions that make sense based off of his skill set and expertise. And he takes them with humility. You can only do what you do well if you're willing to acknowledge what you don't do well. Do you see? So he plays these pivotal roles. Under Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was sent back to Yemen to help kind of in dealing with the governance and consolidation of Islamic rule there. Under Umar radiallahu anh, he was sent to Syria and he helped people learn Islam there. And he participated in various battles, as did Abu Dhar. And then there was a plague that broke out in Syria, and Mu'adh radiallahu anh, he was amongst those who passed away in that epidemic. Before he passed, his wife and children passed away to that plague, and he would make dua to Allah that, Ya Allah, grant the family of Mu'adh the greatest share of your mercy. What's important to understand amongst all of this is that he died when he was 36 years of age. Do you know? I'm 42 years old. I'm getting accustomed to no longer being the youngest person in the room because I started working here when I was 22 and adapting to kind of that transition in terms of age increase. But to think and conceptualize how someone who converted to Islam at 18 and within 18 years of existence just did what he did. But part of it was he was doing what he did well. So when the Prophet can say that Mu'adh is the most knowledgeable about halal and haram, like he's doing like what he does well. Teaching, education, governance. Do you see what I mean? He's plugged in well. Abdullah ibn Umar, who is of a similar age, he does not go into politics. Even though his father becomes the second caliph in Sunni Islam, he's not just a kind of continuation of his father. Like, he has his own life, right? But he's also good at the stuff he's good at. Do you see what I mean? Why we want to know the background of these people is because it then influences how we understand like what they're choosing to continue in teaching, and just contextualizing that the Prophet's companions were made up of individuals that still made a community, but they had their own personas, their own characteristics, their own demeanors, all of these things, strengths and non-strengths. The Sahaba were the best generation, not because they were perfect. They were the best generation because they knew how to get back on their feet after they fell. So Mu'adh bin Jabal, he was known for his deep knowledge of Quran and Sharia. He was known for his deep sense of taqwa, his character, as well as his kind of being a transmitter of Hadith and Quranic ahkam. His ijtihad was a foundational precedent in Islamic jurisprudence and fiqh. He was also a companion that was held in high regard by both Sunni and Shia communities. And he played a key role in consultation for the Khulafa Rashidun, explicitly Umar radiallahu an. Okay, so these are the two people who are narrating this hadith. And we want to kind of retain and learn like more about them. If you're trying to like learn about companions, don't just treat it as stories, right? The majority of us in this room beyond these like two cute children who we're blessed to have in our space. We're at a place where our mental capacity and faculty is a lot different. And so we want to be able to like think and reflect and extrapolate meanings. There's like a great text that a lot of like Hanafi Deobandi people will read called Hayatus Sahaba. That's on the lives of the companions. It's in English. It's 3 volumes. It's just on like biographies of the companions and stories of them. Right? There's other texts as well that you can find and all kinds of stuff all over the internet that you can like listen to stories of the companions, hearing what's about. Contextualizing also helps to make Quran concrete. So we're not just thinking everybody is like one kind of uniform kind of archetype, but they're very different from one another, and how they experience and engage Islam is different. So we want to jump into the hadith. And this hadith, is very kind of broad, but has a lot of meaning to it. And there's 3 distinct advices that the Prophet ﷺ is giving, right? Ittaqillah haythuma kunt, that be mindful of Allah wherever you are. Follow up a bad deed with a good one, and engage people with a beautiful character. Do you know? What I'd like for you to do, just because I've been talking a lot, what's the connection between these 3 advices? If we were to kind of understand how they relate to one another, what's like a theme that we can say connects the 3 of these advices? So you can turn to the persons next to you, exchange names if you don't know names, and looking at these 3 advices, like how does it make sense that they're together in a hadith, and what's their relevance to ethics? Because this is what this chapter of this section of the Arba'in is focused on, is like qualities of etiquette and ethics. So we can talk about that a little bit. Like, how is this relevant to ethics, and how do these 3 things connect to each other? Let's discuss for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and talk. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's like if you catch yourself doing a bad deed, catch yourself doing a bad deed. If you are conscious of some giving out of That's how it
You figured it out? Done? 42? What does that mean? Oh, yeah? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
This team is going for.
This team's going places? Nice. Well done. Okay, so what do we think? Why is this hadith in this section of the book? Like, what does it have to do with ethics, and how do the three advices connect to one another? Maybe we can start with the first. What does this have to do with ethics or etiquette? Or what ethics is it discussing if we were to name those? Yeah.
I think that following God is the cornerstone of ethics. And then doing a good deed after doing a bad one and treating people with grace, they tie into following God and remembering God wherever we are, which is like the cornerstone.
Great. Other thoughts on any of it?
So we mentioned how you always bring up the woman who would always pray all her 5 prayers and follow the 5 pillars of Islam, but she harmed her neighbors with her tongue. And how, like, to be holistically Muslim and really be grounded in God, you have to have good character and treat people well. And so it's not a one-dimensional practice. It has to be multidimensional and, treating people well, if you do something bad, follow it up with forgiveness, and not to be arrogant. You have to be grounded in humility.
Great. What are the, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say something like along the lines of just ihsan, like the 3 things you were talking about, like beautiful character. I think I missed it, like I used the wrong word when trying to paraphrase what you were saying. I was like cancel out a bad deed with a good one, but you don't necessarily know whether the bad deed gets canceled because that's only up to like Allah's mercy and stuff. But generally, I was just thinking ihsan and kind of like I guess a lot of the people that I've met at the IC, like the NYU and the C, I mean, you can turn it around and it's like basically similar things, but just getting to learn from other people and like seeing like these 3 things be practiced out in real time. So yeah.
Great. Someone had their hand raised here. Yeah.
I mean, being like conscious of God, the reason that one of the ways that it connects with following a bad deed of a good one is because you mentioned this a lot. Like if you rely on your deeds, like and to be that perfect Muslim, you rely on your deeds, and if you did a bad deed, like you'll be devastated. But like the good deed is a way out from God, saying that like your deeds are not what really counts. It's like really my mercy, right? And like Prophet said that you don't get in Jannah with your deeds, you get it to the mercy of Allah. So that's a reminder that of being conscious of Allah, because you're relying on Allah essentially, and then treating people with good character. Obviously, like I think one of the things also is that when you treat other people with good character, the other person is also on a journey with Allah, and they have the same struggles as you, like trying to balance things out, trying to be worshipful Muslim, trying to follow the Prophet Sallallahu. And so like you being good to them is actually going to encourage them to be, in most cases, like if you're good to someone, that gives that person a means, a reason to say, Alhamdulillah, this person's good to me, right? Like it uplifts them. So in a way that like we need more of that because that's community, right? That like that's the cornerstone of helping each other get to Allah. And it goes back to like being conscious of Allah.
Great. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
So it reminded me of a lecture I was watching the other day, and basically to sum it up, it was talking about what makes a confident Muslim, and essentially it was saying that a confident Muslim is someone who is like others are safe around, like whether it's like physically or like with their tongue, and that kind of reminded me of this because if you're a confident Muslim, you're going to be confident in the fact that Islam is the truth. And if you're confident in the fact that Islam is the truth, you're going to carry yourself in a way that you are trying your best to be ethical, whether it's how you treat people or like even the causes that you support or lack thereof. And yeah, that goes back to the consciousness of Allah wherever you are and everything else. So I think it also goes into being like a confident Muslim.
Amazing. Someone had their hand raised? No? You did?
Well, I didn't, but
Okay, go ahead.
I think the last part is what it says, and engage others with beautiful character.
Yeah.
I think the interesting part is that third one has to do. That third one has there's like an external part with it, meaning like the first two, you have more control because you could choose to be conscious with the law, and the second one you could choose to follow up with a good deed over a bad one. But the third one, you could choose to engage with people with a good character, but there is a it's not controlled because you don't know how the other person will treat you. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah. So it's a good segue, right? If we were to, do people hear feedback? Like, is there yeah, what is it? That thing?
Yeah.
Huh.
Wait, did it move?
Yeah,
At least in the
it used to be that whole.
It moved by itself.
My voice is so much louder now.
Yeah. Great. So if we were to look at these three buckets and to categorize them with me being the performer of the act, right? Bucket number one, be conscious of Allah wherever you are. It's telling me how I'm supposed to treat Allah. Bucket number three, right? Engage the people with a character that's beautiful, is telling me how it is that I treat other people. And the bucket that's in the middle, follow up a bad deed with a good one, is telling me how I'm supposed to treat myself. You see? So it's creating parameters now through which I have a baseline understanding of what's foundational and pretty much how I relate to everything. Does that make sense? The base definition of a relationship that's sound with the divine is rooted in taqwa. That's the foundational element to the relationship with Allah. How do you relate to Allah? You remember Him everywhere. You bring His presence into whatever it is you have going on. Public, private, secret, whatever is there. I'm sitting with you. I go home and engage my family. I'm awake in my house when everybody else is asleep. My relationship with the divine is rooted in the presence of taqwa in any state that I'm in. Bucket number one, how do you relate to God? Bucket number two, follow the bad deed with a good one. It erases it, right? Cancels it, removes it. It's how do I do right by me? Do you see? I don't have to throw my back against the wall in defense. There's not any two of us in this room, man, who are talking to each other, that it's not two sinners talking to each other. I don't say that indifferently, right? May Allah protect us from committing haram, but nobody doesn't do haram. Does that make sense? Too many double negatives in it. Everybody does haram, right? not in a joyful way. It's a serious thing. But the recognition is that to do right by me, I want to follow the wrong that I do with right. Do you get what I mean? And then the third bucket, engage others with a beautiful character, right? وَخَالِقَ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ, that you want to engage the people, humanity, with a khuluq that is beautiful. Do you see? These are not like arbitrary, ambiguous words. We're going to go into it like as best as we can, but these are the three frames of how I individually can have etiquette with anything. I want to have taqwa with Allah. Do you know? The best way for me to do right by God is to not forget Him, but to remember Him, right? Bucket number two, the best way for me to do right by me is to recognize I'm bigger than the worst of what I bring into the world. So I can follow up what is wrong with something that's right. And you know it, and we'll talk about it this week and next week. People just double down in the justification. This is why I was speaking poorly about someone. It shouldn't be hard to apologize, man. Do you know? As much as it shouldn't be hard to express gratitude. You don't do right by your friends by pretending that they don't do wrong or letting them feel as if the wrong that they do is valid. Do you see? Let alone you don't do right by yourself. You know, you did something you shouldn't have done, own up to it so that accountability gets absolved while you're in this world. Otherwise, you're going to potentially have to be addressed in the next world by it. Does that make sense? And then, third, when you deal with people, you deal with them with a character that's beautiful. Why is it important that we know who Abu Dhar and Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhuma, the narrators of the hadith that Imam Nawawi is citing in this, why they're talking about what they're talking about? Because their actions are laden with these guiding principles. So to act beautifully with people doesn't mean that you do not advocate for social justice, right? Don't see it in a vacuum. See how the people who are transmitting the hadith are living it, right? To have taqwa of Allah means what? Mu'adh bin Jabal, he leaves the Prophet to go to Yemen. Like for things to move forward, he's got to leave behind what is the most beloved thing in his life. But he's doing what's pleasing to the divine. Do you know? Living bigger than oneself. Do you see what I mean? His commitment to Quran, his commitment to Hadith, his commitment to Ijtihad is rooted in this, that he's being told, hey, you do something wrong, follow it up with something that's right. This man is 36 when he dies and achieves immense amounts of things. He's still given a guiding prescription on life that says, don't believe your hype. You can also do something that you're not supposed to do. Do you see? Does that make sense? And you want to read like the actualization of the text, what's called the matan of the hadith, right? The isnad, who is the chain of transmitter, the matan, what they're transmitting. How did these people live the words that they're sharing with us? And when you go read their story, like go through the exercise and say, how do I see their biography through this thing that they shared with us and transmitted on behalf of the Prophet of God? Do you know? And how does that then manifest in this way? Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Right? Three buckets that we're drawing from this hadith. How do I relate to God? How do I relate to me? How do I relate to you? And it's not something that I have to go figure out with ambiguity. The tradition gives us these guiding principles. I've said it a bunch of times. You can go to a Barnes and Noble and you can find a section, self-development, personal development, all this kind of stuff. There's no section in a Barnes and Noble that teaches you beyond how to treat yourself, how it is that you treat others. The Quran and the Hadith tells you very clearly, this is what it means to treat people well. That's just what it is. So then when you have hadith, like what Dania is sharing with us, this woman who is described by the companions, prays in the late hours, gives a lot of charity, neighbors are harmed by her tongue. Explicitly, the Prophet says, La khayra fiha, hiya min ahlin nar. There's no good in her. She's from the people of fire. May Allah protect us from it, right? But it's not like you didn't have the information on what doing it better looks like. Do you know? It's right there. How am I supposed to treat people as a Muslim? You treat them well. So if you're a man and you treat women as objects, you're not being a good Muslim. That's not a judgmental statement. You're not living Islam the way it's supposed to be lived. It's telling you, you treat people with a character that's beautiful, not transactional. If they treat you well, you treat them well, but you treat them with beauty. You walk around on the street, the translation is clear. I have taqwa of Allah. So my taqwa says, man, I slipped. What's going to be pleasing to the divine? I'm going to follow up the bad deed with a good one. I'm not just going to double down and say, this is why I did it. You don't know what I've been through. My life has been tough. Because we love you, we're told, don't do what's haram. Like, there's not a justification. And then if you slip, follow up the bad deed with a good one. And because the taqwa permeates, then you engage with good character. If taqwa was there, good character would follow, really kind of like a domino effect. Do you know what I mean? How can you have taqwa of Allah and still treat people like garbage? Those things then become the breeding ground of somebody else's sunnah. The sunnah of Iblis, he worships God. He believes Allah is God. He's still treating people terribly. Do you know? It doesn't translate into what the baseline is supposed to be. Do you see what I mean? So the hadith, as we approach it, is going to give us a framework. How do I relate to the divine? How do I relate to myself? How do I relate to others? Meaning, even in more like kind of explicit jargon, how am I doing right by God? How am I doing right by me? And how am I doing right by others? And these are kind of foundational principles that exist within those three frames. You do right by God through taqwa. You do right by yourself by acknowledging your capacity to do wrong and following up the wrong with right. And you do right by others by treating them with a good character. Does it make sense? Does that make sense? There's no qualifications put on. It doesn't say you're only doing this when you're standing in front of the Kaaba. That's where you have taqwa. Or the last 10 nights of Ramadan. You have taqwa everywhere. Just like the previous hadith, in Allah katab al-ihsan ala kulli shay. Ihsan is written on everything, meaning when you inventory, where was ihsan present in your decisions and choices? So when you inventory, where was taqwa present? Where was the presence of the divine present? Do you see what I'm saying? Right? So let's do this. What do you think about this framework? What are you taking away from this so far? Let's turn to the persons next to us and talk about it a bit, and then we'll come back and get in a little deeper. But go ahead. Okay, so what are we talking about? Maybe we can hear from a few people. What are we discussing? What's so funny? Share, please. Do you want to come and stand up in front of everybody on camera? Yeah? Yeah? What do we discuss? Maybe we can hear from a couple of people.
What does it look like to relate well to yourself, treat yourself well, and how can often be easier to be good to others and be kind to others, but what does that look like for ourselves? So that's the question we actually had for you to answer.
What does it look like to be kind to yourself?
Yeah, like what does it look to relate to yourself well?
Well, I mean, if we're contextualizing to this hadith, one of the things that's being recommended through prophetic counsel is a way of many ways is you're kind to yourself if you follow up something wrong with something right. Do you know? And like looking at it in that frame, and that you're actually not doing kindness to yourself if you like do something wrong and then you continue to follow it up with more wrong. Do you know? And that can be just like a slippery slope. Do you see? Does that make sense? The general understanding of like kindness to oneself, why we want to look at all these hadith together is because we tend to look at things too isolated. So we looked at hadith that said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibba li akhihi ma yuhibba li nafsi," that not one of you will have complete iman until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, which means that it's okay to love things for yourself, right? Which means it's okay to love yourself. Do you understand? That hadith isn't just about like loving for someone else. How can I love something for you that I don't love for me? I have to first love it for me in order to love it for you. Does that make sense? And embedded within this, like loving for myself, is it okay for me to love myself, right? And that's like a hard thing to do because the world is built on making you hate yourself. Do you know? And the Prophet ﷺ comes to tell everybody is allowed to have a relationship with God. And people don't want something that says everybody can access something. It's not like, rooted in me creating my own religion. But the beauty of this religion is that it's acknowledging that perfection is not the goal, because it's telling you in foundational hadith as a generation that incorporates two individuals that were there from the very beginning of key pivotal milestones in Revelation. Abu Dhar is like number 5 Muslim to convert, and Mu'adh bin Jabal is part of the second pledge of Al-Aqaba. They're in like different places, and it's still relevant to both of them. Like, you're going to make a mistake, be comfortable with that. Do you know? Does that make sense? Right? If I'm afraid to acknowledge that I can do wrong, I like do dumb stuff. You know what I mean? You ever sit with somebody and you're like, why are you saying what you're saying? Or why are you doing what you do? You maybe don't say that because you're not a jerk like me, right? But like you just like you're being weird, but they're being weird because they don't know how to deal with the fact that they can do wrong. Do you know? And that can come from a lot of different places. I'm so hurt by the hurt people have hurt me with. I don't want to acknowledge that I could hurt someone too, because then I have to deal with the fact that maybe I'm somewhat similar to no, like somebody abused you. That's different from you being hurtful to somebody. Do you see what I mean? Your hurtfulness might stem from their abuse. May Allah grant us healing. Do you know? There's nobody who can say that they don't make mistakes. Do you see what I mean? And the hadith is saying, like, Abu Dhar, Mu'adh bin Jabal, you were the 5th person to convert to Islam. You did all of this great stuff. So I'm sending you to Yemen and I'm saying I love you. And when people teach the hadith with this dhikr of what I'm teaching to you, they're repeating their love that the Prophet had for Mu'adh bin Jabal. He's telling these two men who have such like a high maqam that like follow up a bad deed with a good one, man. That's how you do right by yourself. The goal is not perfection. Stop chasing after something that is not possible to acquire. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? And we'll get into it more when we talk about that second advice. What do we think about this 3-pronged framework of like, I don't have to figure it out. You wake up in the morning and you're like, how am I going to live this day? Well, there's got to be taqwa to Allah. There's got to be consciousness through it that I'm going to follow up the bad stuff with good stuff, which also then creates a recipe of like imbalance in the favor of good, because you're going to be doing good things also. And then if you follow up the bad with the good, plus the good that you do that is just good, then the net is good and the net gain is positive, not negative. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? And then the third, I wake up in the morning. How am I going to live beautifully today? Do you know? Like, how am I going to ensure that I'm bringing some light into the world? Right? What do we think about this 3-pronged approach to just how I live? Yeah.
I don't know if this is a reflection on the approach, but I think that like what is kind of triggering for me is like the barrier of entry to the religion is purposely very low. And I think that like in relation to what you were saying earlier about being in a society that's like very much conditioning you to not only like not necessarily have the best relationship with yourself, but inherently this idea that like in order to achieve anything, you need to acquire things and there needs to be like external intervention. And I think with all these 3 things, very intentionally, you don't need anything. like it's very much like a heart or a mental practice, and there's no barrier to entry to them other than your own perception of what your ability is in order to engage with them. And I think that that is interesting to kind of just like reflect on the way that we either allow ourselves to believe whether or not we're worthy or able or whatever it is to do and engage in these practices.
Yeah, and 100%, right? Like you build up all kinds of frustrations, anxiety, overwhelming natures, but you can just sit and take a breath and say, you know what? This sucks right now, but Allah's got it. He's got everything in the way that it's supposed to be. Do you see what I mean? And I just remember and have consciousness of the divine. Do you know? I might have to stand in relation to myself to align myself to a place that says, you know what? I'm not conscious of the divine in a way where I'm indifferent towards his guidance and teachings, but the bar to entry is not high, it is purposely low. And I play a role in choosing how I declutter what is egocentric that makes it hard to be God centric, and then follow up the rest of this stuff because egocentricity is rooted in me not being comfortable and having to bear a facade or turn towards what it is that doesn't make sense to feel a sense of fitting in that compromises on who I'm supposed to be rather than belonging that says I can just come as I am. Do you see what I mean? The recipe for the formula is meant to give me benefit more than anybody else. Do you know? I want to be the person who's nice to people because it's going to do right by my heart. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? And I'm hurting myself when I'm doing wrong because what's the opposite of beauty is ugliness. Do you know? Why would you want to treat people with ugliness? Right? So you got to think about that. Gossip, ugly. Lying, ugly. Racism, crazy ugly. Do you know what I mean? Suit like disgusting. Do you know? And then it's having an impact back on me, right? Does you get what I'm saying? Other thoughts on this three-pronged approach? Yeah.
Just like the third one, it's like personally, I find it like a little bit hard. Like for example, like what if you treat someone good and then they treat you back bad, you know? And then you take like the Quran and you say like maybe the relationship will change, maybe your enemy will become a friend, you know, but then you try again and then still you treat good and then the response. How do you deal with that?
Well, because you'd have to define what goodness means first, right? Nobody's telling you to be somebody's doormat or punching bag. Do you know? So it's not like, oh, I'm going to treat you nice and you spit in my face and I'm still like bringing you. Then I just have like probably some kind of, you know, of my own like wellness challenges I have to address that enables me to make justifications for certain things. That's not what this is saying. Do you know? But to recognize the word good is not like a translation of something that is hasin. So we can understand like a character that's beautiful, but also delving into a sense that this is not a religion that's rooted in moral relativism, but we know what's good through what Allah and His Messenger tell us what's good. So in every scenario, the Quran and the Hadith create a framework of ethics for us to kind of conduct ourselves in. So I don't have to get stuck in a place. Sometimes the best thing for you to do, right? I think we said this in Jummah on Friday. Uh, uh, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, that, O people of Iman, kunu qawamina bil qist, right? That be the people who are standing on qist, like justice, right? Shuhada lillah, like witnesses for Allah. And then what does it say, right? Law ala anfusikum, that even if that means like against yourself, right? Um, or your parents, or al akrabin, those who are close to you. Do you know what I mean? So it's saying the good thing to do is to be just and to speak and be on justice, even if that means speaking against yourselves or your parents or like your close relatives, right? So the right thing to do is to not let them do wrong. It's not easy. It's hard. May Allah make it easy for us. But if we have kind of a sense of what's good by saying, I'm just supposed to put up with people when they're doing wrong by me, that's not an Islamic concept. Do you see what I mean? I talked to a woman earlier this week. She said to me, subhanAllah, may Allah make it easy for her, that her mother died from cancer. May Allah make her from the shuhada and grant them the best of reunions in the world beyond this one. And she said, my relatives were terrible to my mother while she had cancer. And now she's passed and they're terrible to me. This is a grown woman. She's not 5 or 10. She's a grown woman, you know? And she said, is it un-Islamic for me to not talk to those family members who are mistreating me and like mistreating my mother while she was dying from cancer and continues to mistreat me, right? What understanding of deen is created that then says like the best thing to do is to just like pay lip service to these people in a way? Like it doesn't make sense. Do you get what I mean? And it's not like conjecture. You can just read the Quran and you can read the Hadith and you can read the Seerah and you can see how it is that we deal. When the Prophet is leaving from the people who abused him and he goes on Hijrah to Medina, he appoints Ali radiallahu an to return to the Meccans all of the possessions that they entrusted to him to look after because he's dealing with them based off of who he is. Do you know? But he's in a place where he's still dealing with things in a prism of reality. Do you get what I mean? It can't be divorced from that. And we'll delve into it more deeply. But a part of this is going to be about deconstructing a core belief structure that is rooted in negatives, that's really saying, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of success. And I put up with stuff that no person is supposed to put up with. Then we pass it on generationally, you know? Your husbands are going to cheat on you. That's what is that? Do you know what I mean? But the number of women that say this to me in my office, very like just casually, I just expect that's what's going to happen. Boys are treated differently from girls. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that God wants that to happen. You know, you could have ancestors that are idiots, and that's the truth. And that's where like grandpa could be wrong and you follow Deen and not what it is that came before you generationally. Why? Because if you don't follow up bad deeds with good ones, it's going to be something that potentially you're still an account for when you stand in front of God. Do you see what I'm saying? But like the socialization and the rhetoric just employs all of this stuff. And how is this also connected? Taqwa is about consciousness. And when you can bring wakefulness into it and not default settings that then habitually tap into a negative core belief structure that then validates through dissonance behavior that is unjustifiable, you start to bring healthiness to your lineage. And you're not passing on trauma generationally, you're passing on the absence of trauma. Do you get what I mean? Forget about the presence of joy. What if you just didn't have the presence of pain in your day? How different would your day be experienced? Do you get what I mean? Not the presence of joy, the absence of pain, right? It would just be a different experience. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, let's do this because this first part of the hadith, it talks about taqwa. In a little bit, I'm going to read to you a bunch of different things that people have said about taqwa from the companions, the tabi'een, so the generation of the people around the Prophet, the generation that engaged with those people, right? But at this point in your life, you have to have a working definition of what taqwa is. Because there's not just one definition. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Ali radiallahu an, Hassan al-Basri, Sufyan al-Thawri, all of these people, taqwa means this, taqwa means that. It's not because the people who came before them got it wrong, but this is a foundational value in our tradition. Taqwa is a key cornerstone to your relationship with God. You cannot just spit out a rotely memorized definition of it. You have to have an intimate relationship with taqwa. Does that make sense? So that you can then measure its presence in your life, right? So what I'd like for you to do is turn to the persons next to you. What is taqwa? What is the definition of it? Do you know? Like, what does it mean? What does it evoke? What are the metrics of assessment? How do you know you got this thing going on in your world, right? All things taqwa. Let's talk about it for a bit. You know, and if you need a frame of reference, somebody takes shahada right now in this space, right? And then they say, hey, man, that bearded guy, he was talking a lot about this thing of taqwa. What is that? What would you tell them? Do you know? How do you define it? Not in a slogan. Do you understand? Your heart is more important than just a phrase that sounds like it means something, but a definition that creates a metric of assessment attached to an intangible, not a tangible, but can still be assessed, right? What is this thing? How do we have a measurement of it? How do I bring it into my life? All things taqwa. Turn to the persons next to you. Let's talk it out a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Nay, I think from today, the building's open later. From June 15th to July 15th, it's supposed to be open longer.
I wasn't told about this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think the building's open till 9:15 today because Maghrib is later. And for our Shia community, they won't be able to pray it by 8:45. Yeah. But can you message Amira and Sheikh Fayaz and just give them a heads up? They should have reminded the building people already. Yeah. Where are you going? Why? Huh? Are you ready to give your spiel to everybody? Is that why you stood up? You're already standing, yeah.
You don't appreciate what you made in life until you're in the opposite. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. like I'm in the library, like where you want to work second. There's a road where there's also this treasure trove. You can see like the original video too. Really good stuff. That's a lot more in terms of like or it's like even like it's only fast, right? I was like, and like it's not super fine. Yeah, and then they go away. I was like, already, but no, it's just
But if you cannot intend to just like that's not really. He's not going to get the reward. Right? Yeah, but no, I'm saying there's such thing as unintentionally. Or if it is the intentional thing. For the right reason.
I know that was
Okay, so what are we talking about? What do we discuss? What is this thing, taqwa? And I'm not gonna like police answers, right? But don't tell me like somebody else's words. Do you know? You want to have an intimate working definition for yourself. And even if you have to like word vomit a lot because you haven't expressed it, you want to describe it, indicators of it, right? But something that allows for you to then say, this is how I know it's present, and this is how I can assess like its presence and kind of the amount of it that's there. Does that make sense? Right? Because taqwa is not a destination point as much as it's a journey, in the sense that there's not a way to fundamentally say, like the way I've filled a cup to its top, that I've gotten all the taqwa I could have. There's always like room for that to have an increase. Do you see what I mean? But conceptually, most of us, if we're given Islam, we're given like just mechanics and do's and don'ts. It's one dimension, as was said before. But when was the last time you saw a parent telling a kid about what Islam is, and they're giving them like a basic understanding of what taqwa is and how this is an integral part to their relationship with the divine? Do you see? What is this thing? What did we talk about? Yeah.
Something that I was thinking about was something new for me.
Oh, great.
So I was having a lot of anxiety a few days ago, and you shared with me that I should not worship my anxiety. I should not make my decisions based off of what I'm worshiping that's not God. And if I make decisions that are based off of that anxiety, I might not make the right choices. And the entity I'm supposed to worship is God. And so that kind of affected me for the rest of the time afterwards. And it made me think about how do I actually recognize what I'm worshiping throughout my day, because anxiety is something that I struggle with quite a lot. And when I'm in a moment, so after that, whenever I was in a moment of anxiety, I would think I should not make anxiety my source of decisions. I should make God my source of decisions. And God wants me to make decisions that are within my highest belief self. That is from a beautiful moral choice. And then I reflect on the names of Allah and think about like what would Allah want, or would Allah want, or would all of these other names of God want in these situations, because I worship that over my emotions and other things that might distract me from my moment to moment needs. And this happened like a few days ago, so I've not mastered it. But I did notice that since we had that conversation, there are moments where I experience anxiety, and I tell myself, "Do not worship this. I am not. I am not a worshiper of anxiety. I am a worshiper of God, and I am being called to something higher."
Amazing. Alhamdulillah. I'm glad that worked out, because it could have gone in the other direction. And this would have been a different public conversation we were having right now. Yeah. What else? And what can we extrapolate from that, if you want to kind of comment on it? But maybe we could hear from a few other people. Yeah.
Also, I think about what we talked about earlier, where I think in like a lot of other religions, there's a saying, "Oh, treat others the way you want to be treated yourself." But that's not like what we're told. We're told treat others like the way like they should be treated. And like the way like Islam like treat them. And what based on like what the right thing to do is. I also think about this in terms of like in personal relations, like people may have different needs, and just because you're okay with certain things, you're like, oh, you should be fine too. That's not how it works, Or even like you think in terms of like say, the justice system, or like just like a whole host of other things where people are like, oh, if I'm okay abiding by these rules, this person, who comes from like like sometimes they apply like let's say the law to like kids the same way they would apply the law to adults. Because hey, if I don't do this, you shouldn't do this, and like so and so and so. And I feel like our judgment and like the choices we make and like the way we judge others should never be centered around us ourselves. It should always be centered around like like a lot of these things that we're taught. I feel like going through like school and like all this, we're like really taught the first way to do things, but it's really important. I feel like to just have to fear of a lot and just change our mindset, the way we judge ourselves versus what we judge others.
Yeah, and it's got to mean something, right? Like there's a hadith of 3 men that are trapped in a cave. People know this hadith. This boulder comes in front of the mouth of the cave. This is a hadith on tawassul, right? And so they are coming up with a plan to get out of the cave. They say, let's make dua to Allah, saying that, Ya Allah, if we did an act for your sake, then move the rock out of the way. So one of the men in the hadith, he tells a story of a woman that he was attracted to, and he solicits her in ways that a woman should not be solicited. She rejects these proposals, and then they're impacted by famine, drought. She needs assistance. She turns to him for support. He says, I'll give you money so long as you spend the night with me. And she has to agree. What can she do? She's got nothing, no food, no drink. And then when the night comes, he approaches her and gets very close, and so close that he's like near her 2 legs. And then she says to him, like, have taqwa of Allah. Do not approach me in an unlawful way. Do you see? And then he stops and he says later when he's in the cave, if I stopped for your sake, then move the rock. And the rock moved. It can only mean something if the reminder to have taqwa means something to him. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? And it's not just like a semantical conversation. People make you have an unhealthy understanding of taqwa, the way that we can lose nuance in translation. It's not like fear of God, the way someone's afraid of the dark or afraid of spiders. That's not what taqwa is. Do you know? You gotta have a baseline definition so that when your brain is emptied, that's the whole point of dhikr, like remembrance, is so that you remember and you bring what you forgot back to the forefront and it's not emptied of it. It's present. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? You had your hand raised? Yeah.
Yeah, so we were talking about thinking about taqwa kind of visually, as if you were wearing something else all white, and as you're moving around the world, you'd be really conscious of what's around, what could spill on your white clothing. If you're in the subways, you'd be very conscious about sitting down and just like dirty your clothing, and how if you have that consciousness of what you're wearing, it's similar to taqwa, where you're just conscious of what's taqwa and how that your actions will be impacting your relationship.
Yeah, beautiful illustration, right? I was walking down the street with my wife and kids the other day. It was raining. My wife was wearing like heels, a beautiful dress, and it was raining outside. And as we're going, there's puddles and water everywhere. She's got to like hold her dress up, and I didn't know how to help her. So I was like, I don't know why you wore this thing. It was raining outside, right? But she doesn't want to get the water on her clothes. Do you know? And she's consciously aware of the possibility of X happening based off of Y interactions. Does that make sense? Right? And this is like an important thing. You know, you have awareness, you're awake, you're kind of mindful of what's going on around you in a tangible sense and an intangible sense. Do you see what I mean? Other thoughts on this taqwa? What is it? How do I increase it? Yeah.
I see taqwa as a filter that I implement for myself. That all my deeds, all my actions, all my thoughts, anything I do needs to go through this filter. Like if it pass, if it will make Allah upset, it won't go through this filter. If it's will make Allah happy and will be good, then so I'll have it like as a built-in option in myself. So, and
Great.
the more I practice, the more I learn from everything, the more I increase my consciousness, the more this filter build up better and better and better.
Yeah, right. That's like a spiritual principle and an ethical principle. The value itself is the vehicle for the increase of the value. You want more taqwa, then you have to exert taqwa. Do you know what I mean? You want more patience, then be patient. That's how you make it a stronger muscle. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, when you make the point of like, for me, I'm like, how can you realize when you don't have taqwa? I think that what made the definition a little bit more personal to me. Like, how is your body reacting? How is your mind reacting? How is your heart reacting when you don't have taqwa? And how are you gonna build that muscle to recognize when you don't have taqwa to bring taqwa back into your life? Because it's kind of hard, like when you're going through mundane things, like going to school, going to work, you're doing an assignment. Like, how are you having taqwa at that moment, right? How are you going to remind yourself to have taqwa at that moment? So I think that's what the key is. How can we recognize when we don't have taqwa, and how can we bring it back into our lives?
Yeah. And it goes back to what Abir said. Who is your God? What are you actually worshiping? This man in this hadith whose dua is strong enough to make a boulder move, right? He is in a place where what is making his decision when he's approaching this woman? And when the reminder comes, have taqwa of Allah, he's got to confront the fact that God is not present in any of this nonsense that he's bringing forward. Do you see what I mean? How did he get to that place? Well, he started worshiping something else. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you see the one who takes his hawa, his desire, as being his God? Do you see? It's like a tangible thing. You can assess it. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is my God in this moment? Like, what am I actually becoming submissive to and subservient to? the physicality of it, my stomach, my sexual organs, what's making my decision for me? What am I a servant of in this moment? Let's read some of these sayings to kind of fine tune this for us. When you get home tonight, go through the exercise, open a notebook, right at the top, what is taqwa to me? And then answer it. And then in a week, come back to what you wrote, spend some time with it, right? The same way you want to learn how to make wudu, and the same way you want to learn how to do this stuff, you got to build a relationship with some of these things, right? Ihsan and taqwa, two key values in our tradition that you want to strengthen, right? May Allah make us from the muhsineen and from the muttaqeen, right? It's not something that's just arbitrary language, do you know? Nor is it a given. You can say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. This hadith, as we expound upon it, it also tells you a lot about theology. Do you know? Who is the God that you are conscious of? And what do you know of this God in terms of who he is? That it's easy to forget him in certain moments. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh, he says, taqwa is fear of the majestic, acting upon the revelation, being content with little, and preparing for the day of departure. So giving us a 4-part framework that you have awe of Allah, obedience, contentment, and readiness for the hereafter. May Allah make us people of Jannah, right? These are things you're bringing to your presence. Do you see what I mean? So again, Ali radiallahu an, he says, taqwa is fear of the majestic, acting upon the revelation, being content with little, and preparing for the day of departure. Umar radiallahu an is asked by Ubay ibn Qab radiallahu an about taqwa. He says, what is taqwa? And he says, have you ever walked on a path full of thorns? Yes. What did you do? I rolled up my garment and was cautious. That is taqwa. So taqwa is walking carefully, avoiding like the masiyah, the sins, just as you would avoid thorns on a dangerous path. And what is advice number 2? When you do the sin, you follow it up with what is hasin, right? So you're conscious afterwards as well. You fall into it. The man is about to engage this woman in the most inappropriate and atrocious of ways. And then the reminder of taqwa breaks him out of it to the extent that inaction is still action in our tradition. Do you see what I mean? One of the ways I like to define taqwa is in relation to tawbah. The tawbah is the vehicle that gets you out of the hole when you fall into it. Taqwa is the mechanism within you that says, hey, the hole is coming. Don't fall in. Do you see? Yeah. Can you hold it for 2 minutes? Don't forget it. Yeah, are you sure? Great. Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he says, the people of taqwa are those who avoid what is forbidden and were cautious with what is permissible out of fear of falling into the forbidden. Why? He's not hyper legalizing our tradition, but this is what you're doing. It's like you're walking around a bunch of thorns. So what are the thorns? Like the haram, right? And what are the things you want to be extra cautious about? You want to be cautious about even getting close to those things. There's wakefulness, mindfulness. You can have a reductive understanding of haram, right? So the drinking of wine, haram. The eating of swine, haram. Gossip, haram. Backbiting, haram. Racism, haram. Like arrogance, haram. Do you see? You don't want to even get close to this stuff. Do you know? So he's telling us in this way, the people of taqwa are those who avoid like what is forbidden. And we're cautious with what is permissible out of fear of falling into the forbidden. Why? Because it's going to rip you up the way thorns rip up clothes, man. Why would you do that? Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he says, taqwa is that Allah not see you in a place he has forbidden, nor miss you in a place he has commanded you to be. This is also a baseline definition of what haya is. Haya is a modesty that isn't rooted in just one manifestation of dress. And men have hijab the way women have hijab. This is a part of it. Do you know? But modesty, haya, as a definition, is Allah does not see you in gatherings that He would not want you to be in, nor does He see you absent from gatherings that He would want you to be in. Do you see? And Abdullah ibn Abbas is connecting this to taqwa also. Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah, whose 40 hadith collection we're looking at, he says taqwa means obeying Allah's commands and avoiding His prohibitions. It's just very clear and practical. That's just what it is. Do you know? Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, he says taqwa is to act in obedience to Allah, hoping for His mercy upon a light from Him, and to leave disobedience to Allah out of fear of His punishment upon a light from Him. Talq ibn Habib, who was a tabi as well, he says taqwa is acting in obedience to Allah, hoping for His mercy, and taqwa is leaving disobedience to Allah out of fear of Him. That is taqwa. Maymun ibn Mihran, he says, the God conscious is the one who guards himself from what Allah has forbidden and acts upon what He has obligated. Abu Darda radiallahu an, he says, perfect taqwa is to fear Allah so much that you fear Him even in small matters, like a speck of dust. So when Umar radiallahu an is Khalifa, he says that if a mule, if a dog, like an animal, is not done right by in the empire that's huge at that time, he says that animal has a right over him still because he's in charge of all of it. Do you get what I mean? Leadership is not something that one takes lightly. Do you know? When we have 10, 20,000 people that claim this community to be theirs, right? All of you have an opportunity to stand in front of Allah against me on the day of judgment because I run this thing. Do you understand? Kulukum ra'in. All of you are shepherds. You didn't want to be a dad. Why did you have a kid? You didn't want to be a spouse. Why did you get married? It's not a game. You get to a place where you take on responsibility, you do right by it, and you don't do wrong by it when you now choose to be in this place because you bring in taqwa that says, I still have accountability towards the people that have rights over me. I'm not doing it to feed my ego. I do it with ihsan because that's the only thing that gives me a chance of being able to say, I tried my best. Do you see what I mean? So even in the small matters, like a speck of dust, if you treat this space well and you don't say it's somebody else's responsibility to keep it clean, it's my responsibility, you're going to probably take care of the bigger things better because you're dealing with the smaller things as a matter of importance. Does that make sense? Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he says, taqwa is not fasting by day and praying by night. Rather, taqwa is to abandon what Allah has prohibited and fulfill what He has obligated. Why? Because He is your God. No one else is your God. So when you have consciousness of God, you're going to do what God is asking you to do and stay away from what God tells you to stay away from, right? God tells you to not be racist. Stay away from racists, man. Stay away from people who think success is having just a lot of the world. That's not what it is. Do you know? That's not success. But embedded within that is a rejection of superficial religiosity. Do you get what I mean? This is why the hadith of the woman who prays in the nights and fasts and gives a lot in charity, but she still mistreats people with her tongue. La khayra fiha, hiya min ahlin nar, right? You could do a lot of stuff. That's not the goal. Like, it's supposed to be transformative in some way. Where's the taqwa? You want to stand up and lead the prayer so people can say you recite beautifully, then that's what you're doing. Be real with yourself. Do you know? The people of taqwa are those who avoided what is forbidden and were cautious even with what is permissible, fearing it may lead to sin. Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu an, who narrates this hadith that we're looking at, the people of taqwa are the leaders. the lamps of the night, the lamps of guidance. Every compassionate, knowledgeable, and understanding person is amongst them. How beautiful, right? The reframe now is not about what some of us have difficulty with because we're just beaten with like you're not good enough. That's not what this religion is about, right? About telling you how you're terrible at anything. So you want to have a metric of an outcome of what is a person of taqwa. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he says, the people of taqwa are the leaders, the lamps of the night, the lamps of guidance. Every compassionate, knowledgeable, and understanding person is amongst them. Because that's what your taqwa should bring you to, man. Not to be a jerk, to be kind, to be a person of mercy, a person of rahmah. You're not beating people over the head with religion. You're empowering them through it, right? Where does the Prophet alayhi salam make somebody feel like garbage because of where they're at in their life? Do you see what I mean? Taqwa is that you fear Allah. Amir Ash-Sha'bi, he says, taqwa is that you fear Allah in private and public, accept the little you have, and prepare for the day of departure, right? Contentment in knowing Allah is the one who allocated for me my provision. Allah is the one who determines for me what I have. I don't have to chase after haram. All of it's written for me in terms of what I'm going to get. So there's no justification. I just determine the means through which I acquire some of these things. And I'm happy with what I have because my God knows me better than I know myself, right? So if me, not like living as a chaplain, but I had like, I'm just talking about me. It's not about any of you. You all can be where you're at and we're different people. But I don't know why God didn't make me a multimillionaire. Maybe I couldn't handle being a multimillionaire. You know what I mean? I don't know, right? I don't know. Do you know? People ask me like all the time different things about where I'm a 42-year-old man. Do you know what I'm saying? But even when I was 22, whatever age, right? My contentment wasn't laden in just like what the confines of whiteness throw upon me. Somebody says to me, like, was it hard for you that you couldn't play sports after you got injured? I might not have been Muslim if I did that. Somebody said, what would it have been like? Are you sad you're not as tall? No, man. I don't know what I would have been like if I was a taller human being. Do you know what I mean? Right? I don't know. Allah in his wisdom enables me to be given what he gave to me. And the things that he kept from me, I don't know what he's protecting me from. Do you get what I'm saying? I just got to do right by what it is that he gifted me with. Does that make sense? Anything could be a fitna or a ni'mah other than iman. Always a ni'mah. But everything else has this openness to being something that you might hurt and you should hurt when things are hurtful to you. But you don't know there's a khair in something not going the way that you thought. You just got to wake up to it with taqwa and stop playing games with your life sometimes, right? So taqwa is that you fear Allah in private and public, accept the little you have, and prepare for the hereafter. Imam Shafi, rahimahullah, he says that whoever wishes that Allah opens his heart and protects him from the darkness of ignorance, let him abandon excessive speech, excessive food, and excessive mixing with people, and let him adopt between himself and Allah a cloak of taqwa. The best provision for the hereafter is taqwa, Imam Shafi says. And whoever fears Allah, he will make a way out for him. And he's referencing Quran in this, where Allah tells us whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will make for him a way out of everything. Imam Shafi writes in a poem, if you are not safe from the harm of people unless you displease your Lord, then know their anger is a small price for the pleasure of Allah. If you are not safe from the harm of people unless you displease your Lord, then know their anger is a small price for the pleasure of Allah. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he says, taqwa is not raising your voice in the mosque, nor is it extreme austerity. Taqwa is in the heart and shown through just actions. He says, knowledge is not many narrations. Knowledge is light placed in the heart by Allah, and its sign is taqwa. And I want to share these things with you for a few reasons. Not any one of these people is saying taqwa is what this person before me said, right? They're spending time with it. They're reflecting on it. They're contemplating upon it. You could do this too. You sit down and you think, what does it look like to live a wakeful life? A life that is not absent of consciousness or just on default settings. There's no presence to it. Do you know? And you start to think, what brings about this presence? When am I more wakeful, right? Undeniably, for a lot of us, we're different in Ramadan because we're not consuming so much. Do you know? You reflect, you think upon it, you act upon what you know. Do you see what I mean? The example I use a lot for a lot of people on the day of Eid after Ramadan, they feel weird eating food in the morning. You don't feel weird. That's shaitan getting in your head and trivializing what is the actual success metric of fasting. For the first time, you're aware of eating when most of the time you're not aware of eating. And you can now be aware of your capacity of awareness. That, man, this thing actually worked. I'm thinking twice before I put food in my mouth. That's taqwa, you know? You don't want to dilute that. You want to enhance it. You see what I mean? Okay, so let's do this because Maghrib comes in 5 minutes. I don't know if we have any dates, but we can check if there's dates for people who are fasting. Let's turn to the persons next to us. What are you taking away from today's conversation? We'll call the adhan when it comes in. Yeah, we're going to get to a question. But let's talk about just what we're taking away, and then we'll come back, make a couple announcements, and we'll take the questions, etc., and then we'll break for Maghrib. But go ahead. Can you go see if we have some dates?
Sounds like a man on the street interview. What is something?
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly.
You should make that video.
Yeah, I don't know if we can fix all the opinions.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I keep getting these suggested videos of these guys asking people random like geographical questions. And lately I've been getting ones where people are asking like what is the largest Muslim population in the world, what country? And nobody gets the answer right ever.
You say Saudi, right?
Turkey, Saudi, some people said England.
India
Yeah.
is more Muslim than Indonesia.
Is it? I think it's Indonesia.
It's the biggest Muslim majority.
Yeah. But either way, none of these people get it right. They all get it wrong.
Sounds like you get it wrong.
I would. I was.
India has more Muslims.
Okay. Sorry, Maghrib's in a few minutes. Yeah. What are some of the things we were taking away from today? What was your question? From before?
Well, I was wondering about those moments where, like either in a state of anger or sadness, like a heightened emotional state, there's an awareness of like, these are thorns, or, like, these are holes. Oh shoot, like there's an awareness, but then I don't know. Unfortunately, there's like we start jumping in the holes anyway, or like getting our clothes ripped, and I'm like, I don't know. I just find that a challenge. Like, if you have any thoughts on that.
It is hard, but the fact that you're aware of it is like a step in the right direction. Now, all these things kind of combine together. You live in a hard world, do you know? And it makes it really hard for us to make ourselves vulnerable. And I don't know how to hold pain as much as how to share people's pain. So if somebody came to you and very vulnerably said, this is happening to me, or I'm holding these feelings, what would you do? Or when it gets into your head, like a literal emotional nakedness of being able to acknowledge like a very real sense of self is not an easy thing to do. So just because the thorn is there, it doesn't mean that because you know it's there, you know how to get it out, right? And you got to be able to figure out strategically, how do I approach this with a sense of recognition that the thorn metaphor is amazing, because pulling out a thorn is hard and it hurts. Do you know? It's not easy. Like, it's stuck in there. You ever get a splinter in your finger and that thing just is there, right? Now think you got like a ton of thorns stuck in your arm and stuck in your leg and whatever else, and you got to pull these things out. It's not easy. Like, you're gonna probably turn to people to help you in some capacity, but the right people to help you. Do you know what I mean? And that's gonna vary from situation to situation, but you don't have to do it on your own. That's like the whole point, that we have like a community, we have a ummah. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Okay, let's do this, because we're gonna pray in a minute. The building today is supposed to start being open till like 9:15 or 9:30, because Maghrib is ending. And for our Shia community, Maghrib is about 20 minutes later than our Sunni community. And we have some dates, it looks like. People are fasting. You want to grab a date. Next Monday, we're intending to start this halakha in the new space. And we just want to try to figure out a couple of things in relation to that. So if we did a potluck iftar, the way we would normally do here during the academic year, how many people would be able to bring something for that? It's okay if you don't, but if you could, like, actually will bring something, can we just get a show of hands? Inshallah. Yeah, great. And how many people would like for us to do an iftar following the halakha? Like, who would stick around with Maghrib being at 8:30? Yeah. Huh?
If it's the new space, it should be fine because there's no like I can stick around as long as
No, there's no cutoff. We can be there. We can be there all night. You know what? They want to stay there. We could sleep over. There's enough room for all of us to sleep there. A lot of us could have our own rooms too. Alhamdulillah. But they're pretty dirty right now because we took out the ceiling the other day. Yeah. But what were the other questions we had to ask in relation to this?
If they would help to clean up and set up, so get their
Oh
own
yeah.
facilities.
So if we're doing this over there, is there people who would help set up and clean up? Is that interesting to people? Yeah. Great. Well, just by show of hands, how many people could get there early, like around 6? Yeah. And how many people could stay after? Like, maybe we'll stay there till like 9:30 or something. Yeah, great. Okay. Then the other thing we're trying to figure out is if we should also move the Wednesday halakha and have a meal attached to that as well, of some kind, or just do the halakha. Thanks, man. Any thoughts on that? Nodding your head is not an answer to the question. That's not like a what is that? Yes to what? Yeah. It'll be fun. What would be fun? Having the halakha there and a meal after? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't work here anymore. Yeah. So I don't know. Huh? Sorry? Yeah, maybe. We might move it to 6 or 6:30. Yeah, instead of 7. Yeah. No? Why?
Because I'm driving from far away. And
What time works for you?
this time.
6:30. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Will there be air conditioning that's working?
On the second floor, there is air conditioning that works. On the first floor, there is not yet, but there will be, inshallah, soon. And that's the answer to that question. Yeah. But we're working on all of it. It's a work in progress.
Could I ask that if people are willing to stay and clean up or get there early and set up, if you're not in the volunteer group chat, if you could come at the end of the halakha so we can add you to the group chat, that'd be great.
Great. And then as we kind of progress, we're going to have a gradual lift of programming there, as well as kind of ideating around new stuff. So just make dua. It goes well. It's a raw space, and we're kind of just working through it, ensuring that everything is kind of done as properly as possible. But we just need everyone's help as things move forward, inshallah. Okay, let's take a pause here. If people want to put their chairs against the wall, we'll call the adhan and break for Maghrib.